Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I am honored to be interviewing a very, very special space champion, Dr. Barry, a recently retired chief historian from NASA. Attending the United States Air Force Academy for International Relations, Stanford University for his master's degree in political science and government, and the University of Oxford for his doctoral study in political science, Dr. Barry was able to spend his working career in the United States Air Force. And after retiring from the Air Force, he was able to work at NASA's headquarters and then as a chief historian. Dr. Barry, like many of us, was inspired by a NASA astronaut, John Glenn, and his journey into the space industry is truly remarkable. I can't wait to learn more about Dr. Barry's journey and research. Welcome, Dr. Barry. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to do this interview.
Hi, Gitika. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Yeah, so before we kind of get into understanding your journey into the space industry in more depth, I'd like to know more about your typical day. What do you currently do and how does it run?
I'm retired now, so I don't have a firm schedule every day, but all that military background and stuff, I think that's sort of led me to be sort of self-disciplined in my own way. So I just keep kind of a normal schedule, get up in the morning and take the dog for a walk, say my prayers and do a little meditation, do some exercise and stretching, and then plunk down in front of my laptop here and read the news about what's going on in the space industry. And I've kind of got sort of two projects, if you can call it that, that I'm working on in my first couple of years of retirement, I hope anyway. One is getting back up to speed in the flying business. So I've gone back to flying as a personal hobby on gliders and powered planes as well. And I'm also doing a bunch of history projects that I really had hoped I'd get to do when I was chief historian, but I was too busy doing chief historian work, arguing about the budget or whatever other things. So I'm kind of doing those things and balancing them and spending some more time with my family and taking the dog for a walk in the afternoon when the weather's nice, like today, or other things like that. So it's great, but we keep a pretty regular schedule here, and that helps me kind of get things done and check the boxes when we move ahead on various projects.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that you're able to find time now to do some of the projects that you've been wanting to do. So I'm glad to hear that. What is the most exciting project or research that you've worked on, whether it be as a part of NASA or as a part of the US Air Force?
Oh boy, well, I've been lucky to be involved in lots of different things in my very long career in the Air Force and at NASA. But I think if I were to pick one, I'd probably have to say working on the movie Hidden Figures. I was one of the consultants on that movie. There were many people at NASA who helped out with the movie, but I got lucky to be one of those folks. So I talked with the director, Ted Melfi, a lot about the script and helped them find answers to questions and pointed people to other people at NASA who could find photographs or documents. Our archivists were very busy helping out with that movie. And then just getting to do some of the promotional stuff. When the movie came out, NASA was also promoting the movie, not promoting the movie so much as promoting the message of the movie, which was that space is not just about us white guys. It's all kinds of people involved in space, and their stories haven't been as well told as the ones you know about maybe all the time. But they're very interesting, and that was fun. So I actually got to walk on the red carpet when the movie premiered up in New York, which was a really odd event because none of the people from the news media wanted to, they're like, okay, you're a historian, go away. We want to talk to Kevin Costner or Taraji Henson or somebody. So, but it was fun, and I learned an awful lot about all kinds of things, including women who worked as human computers.
Yeah, I love Hidden Figures. I think it's an amazing theme. And what you were saying about how space is for all, and just to break away those stereotypes that only old people or, white men have to be a part of space is just a stereotype we're trying to break and kind of letting everyone, whoever was passionate to be a part of the space industry. It's also kind of a mission of my interview series is to highlight the diverse careers. I feel like, being a historian or into space policy, that side is not very as commonly heard in schools. When people think of NASA, they're like, oh, physics or, like science. They don't really think of the other aspects. So I think it's very nice to meet someone who's in a different side of things. So what was your role as, the chief historian at NASA?
Well, the chief historian job's interesting. In fact, I had the same issue that that you were just there. Even as chief historian, I'd introduce myself to people and say, "I'm the chief historian at NASA," and they'd say, "What? You mean they're not all engineers working there at NASA?" And no, they're not. I mean, we have all kinds of people, human relations specialists and budget folks and things like that. But the history office was actually founded in 1959, a year after NASA was created. And NASA's first administrator had been running what's now Case Western Reserve University. He was president up there before he became NASA administrator. And the head of the history department, when he got the job to come to NASA, the head of his history department came running up to him and said, Keith, Keith Glennon, you've got to have a historian there because you guys are going to be doing so many important historic things. And Dr. Glennon thought about it for a little while, and he got to the headquarters, and he was busy setting up NASA and doing all those other things. But within a year, they'd hired the first chief historian. And the chief historian's job is pretty widespread. There were like 8 different things in my performance report when you measure them, and they varied from being the historical advisor to the administrator. So if the administrator has a question about history, I'm there to answer that. To overseeing the archival program at NASA, to writing reports about historical events and consulting with people at NASA on things about that, to communicating with the public about NASA's history. So the great part about the job was there was almost always something new every day. And you'd get sometimes really strange questions from people. I get calls from reporters out of the blue. The first phone call I took as NASA chief historian was from a TV network up in Scandinavia. I think it was from Norway. They were doing a documentary on musk oxen. And they had heard that the fiber from muskox had been used to make the underwear that the Apollo astronauts wore when they went to the moon. As it turns out, that's not really what it was. But,
Okay.
but they heard that, and they came to me to find out what the answer was. Of course, I didn't know what the answer was. So I had to go dig around. And that was, to me, that was the most important skill set I had as chief historian. Was I didn't know the answers to everything, but I usually knew where to go find the answers. And so I called my friend Kathy Lewis at the National Air and Space Museum and said, "Kathy, you're an expert on spacesuits. What was the underwear made out of it the Apollo astronauts wore?" And she goes, "Oh, it was beta cloth," and she described it. I said, "Okay, would you like to talk to these folks from Norway about this?" And she, of course, did. And so that was my first question, and my first answer is chief historian.
Yeah, that might have been a very interesting career. I feel like every day you might have learned something new, and it was constantly a fun journey. And I'm really curious. I read about your doctorate degree, and you wrote about the political history of the early Soviet space program. Could you describe your research project more in detail?
Yeah, well, I wound up doing space history kind of by accident, really. The Air Force it was going to send me off to graduate school to get my doctorate after I'd been teaching at the Air Force Academy for a while. Needs of the Air Force, I had to go back and fly airplanes again for a while. No complaints from me there. I like flying airplanes, so I went back and flew airplanes for a while. But then things changed. The Cold War was over, and the Gulf War was over, and suddenly they didn't need so many older pilots. At that time, I was in my 30s, and in the Air Force, that's an old pilot if you're in your 30s, because it's a young person's game. But so they were looking for something for me to do. My old boss at the Air Force Academy called me up and said, "Could you go back to school again?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to go back, and get my PhD." But that's something I kind of always wanted to do. And so I reapplied to school and kind of I get in kind of by the skin of my teeth because this is the spring and it's for that fall. And I get to graduate school, and of course, the topic I proposed to do 2 years before was about Soviet defense policy. Well, by the time I got to school, there's no more Soviet Union. It was gone. Right? So now what am I going to do? And so I spent the first 6 months thinking about what I'd like to do and talking with my supervisors about various topics. And the thing that really fascinated me the most was all this news that was coming out about the Soviet space program in the 60s. And I'd be really interested in that when I was a kid, and I followed both the US space program and what I could learn about the Soviet space program at the time. As it turns out, my supervisor liked that topic as well, and I was really enthused about it. So I got to spend 3 years studying, what did the Soviet Union do in space in the 60s, and why did they do it the way they did? And it was very interesting because there's so little known, but I was able to connect, in addition to doing research in Russia and sort of research elsewhere, I was able to connect with a whole bunch of people who had been studying Soviet space for a long time, and that was a really great network of folks to do things. And we shared information back and forth, and I think that helped a lot in determining kind of the political trajectory of the Soviet space program, which is quite interesting. But I won't start talking about that because otherwise I'll never shut up.
Yeah, I know you could go all day, especially because you love history so much. And I'm actually really curious because you were saying how you accidentally kind of got into the space, or like to go to work at NASA and like get your PhD. So how did you get into space? And first of all, I know you were really interested in the Air Force. So how did it kind of transition for you?
Well, and actually I'll trace this back to space because I was about 4 years old when John Glenn flew in space. And the first thing I remember, first thing, chronologically that I can remember in my life, is sitting on the floor in front of the TV, watching John Glenn's flight and worrying about whether he would actually be able to come back safely because of the loose heat shield. Remember that? I got fired up about space, and like many people growing up in the 60s, I want to go be an astronaut, I want to go do this stuff. And the obvious path was, okay, well, you got to be a military pilot, and you've got to be a test pilot and do all those other things. And so my goal was to get to the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy, and then go from there and do things. I got into the Air Force Academy, and I got there, and I decided I was going to be an engineer. And then I discovered, engineering and I don't get along really well. My math skills are not stupendous. It's something I can do, but something I really didn't enjoy at all. And I had a political science course early on in my career as a cadet at the Academy on American government, and the teacher I had was fantastic, John McCartney, and he was after I discovered that I wasn't going to make a very good engineering major, I went to go see Colonel McCartney. I said, Colonel McCartney, I'm an astronautical engineering major, and I really don't like it very much. What do I do? And he says, well, he said, I thought you'd be a poli-sci major, so why don't you be a poli-sci major? And so I did, and I thought, okay, there's the end of my astronaut career, right? I'm not going to be an astronaut, but I still got through the academy, and then and I got to go fly, and I kept doing things that were interesting to me, and finding interesting and oddball things that kind of opportunities that kept coming up, like going back to grad school again, and I got to the end of my Air Force career, and strangely enough, I had gotten to know the previous chief historian, Roger Lanius, in the course of my academic career studying the Soviet space program from the 60s. And as I was retiring from the Air Force, Roger sent me this note at one point. He goes, Bill, why aren't you applying for a job at NASA? And I said, because I don't think there is a job at NASA. And he goes, no, you need to start asking around. And I thought, well, you're crazy. What are the odds that they're going to need a guy who's got some Russian language background, knows about the Soviet space program, and can write a lot of stuff really fast. Well, surprise! I started looking around, and a job landed in my lap, and so I retired from the Air Force and went immediately to work at NASA headquarters, working basically in the international relations division on the space station project, and dealing with our relationship with the Russian Federation. And from there, I got to do some other really interesting things. And then eventually, the chief historian job opened up, and that was something I'd kind of been interested in all along. And so people often ask me, how do you get to be NASA chief historian? I said, well, whatever you do, don't do what I did, because it takes too long. But I just happened to be, in the right place at the right time, I think, largely.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of how you don't have to be just, a science major or a math major in order to work at NASA. I know a lot of my friends, they've been interested in space ever since they were a little kid, but they wouldn't go to pursue a career because they weren't strong in calculus. And they're like, oh, I need calculus to go work at NASA. I can't be bad at calculus and want to work at, a space organization. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. Even me, like I thought that because I liked biology, I couldn't be a part part of the space industry. Like I'd have to go to engineering in order to pursue something at NASA. So there's always these misconceptions, especially with high school students or middle school students when they think about NASA. And I think your example is perfect. I think as long as you love space, there's literally, any career, any job could be merged into the space industry, and there's a job there probably waiting for you. So I think that's an
Yeah,
amazing
there is.
example.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. NASA is primarily an engineering organization. So it's engineers and scientists mostly, but there are lots of other people in there that do stuff. And the more you know about engineering and science, the better off you'll be, right? Being at Air Force Academy education for me, there's a lot of math and science, and they took a lot of engineering courses, and that served me well when I got to NASA because I wind up in a meeting with somebody and they started talking about all this stuff about astronautical engineering and orbital dynamics. I actually had a course when I was a cadet on orbital dynamics, so I kind of follow along and not get lost in the rush. So it doesn't hurt to have that background, but you don't have to have that. And the main thing is you want to bring a lot of passion about what you do and to be the best that you can at what you do, and then look for the opportunities when they come.
Yeah. And I know you were also already talking about how you had an obstacle when you were trying to, go from an engineer to poli-sci major. So were there any other obstacles that were like prominent in your career that really like defined who you became or, were impactful to your life career?
Well, I think the realizing that I wasn't cut out to be an engineer was probably the first big obstacle that really kind of and it really depressed me actually. I was in college and I'm working really hard and it's like I'm just not getting this, and this doesn't. But I'm really digging this poli-sci course over here and having a fun time reading this stuff. So you had the trade-offs there. But but you learn that okay, that's finally you realize there's some things I'm strong at and there's some things I'm not so strong at, and you go with what your strengths are and try and make sure that the weaknesses don't hurt you too badly in the process. But there was that one. I also wasn't particularly athletic. So to get into a military academy, you have to pass a physical fitness test. And so when I was in high school, I joined the swim team. And I was at a very big high school in Massachusetts where I grew up. And the swim team had a varsity team and a JV team. And I was so bad that the coach said, Barry, if you want to stay on the swim team, you have to swim practices with both the JV and the varsity. And so I meant I was in the pool like 4 hours a day for the winter season, which was, it was crazy, right? But I got in really good shape as a result of that. And I learned really well how to tread water. So, because people were swimming over me all the time with the guys in the varsity team. But I learned a lot about myself that way. And because I had a goal in mind, I wanted to get there. And so for me, that was a key step in my life. So, I think you just have to sort of find ways to make it work and work with the gifts you have and enhance the ones that you can and prop up the ones that aren't so strong as much as you can.
Yeah, I think it's always important to have a goal and just work towards it. And I think that shows with your passion to be a part of, the space industry, or at least like fly something or work at or be at the Naval Academy. I think it really shows your passion and drive, and you could survive those 4 hours of swimming just to reach your target per day. So I think that's really great. So what was really key to becoming knowledgeable about the industry you decided to pursue, like apart from obviously the Naval Academy?
Well, of course, I went to the Air Force Academy now. So
Okay.
I get into the Naval Academy and I said, no, thank you, I'm going to go to the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
I tell my Naval Academy friends that there's a lot of sort of friendly rivalry between the service academies.
Okay.
But anyway, I
Maybe like an internship or like a mentoring experience, or did you?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had a lot of people who I didn't realize at the time, but that mentored me in lots of different ways. And I've been extremely lucky throughout my life to have people who, told me, when I was doing well and when I was doing not so well, and what I needed to do to fix that. But also who trusted me to take on a task and run with the ball. From the guy who hired me to mow his lawn when I was a young kid, to bosses I worked for at NASA. You know, my boss in 2007 decided that I didn't have to be working on the program or international relations with the Russians anymore. He was going to send me to Paris to go be the NASA representative in Europe. And that was a really great job and a lot of fun. But it was also one that lots of people want to get. And I wasn't the obvious candidate because, you know, the only foreign language I really spoke was Russian, and I really needed to be able to speak French in Paris. So I did a lot of quick studying on that. But no, having lots of people that mentored me throughout my life, I'd be hard pressed to pick any handful of them. There's probably 30 or 40 of them that I could probably name off easily.
Yeah, I think teachers are always amazing. Like even my middle school, I got into rocketry because of my tech ed teacher in 7th grade. And so he really changed the way I thought about the space industry. So without him, I'd probably be on a whole different track. So I know teachers can make a huge difference in the way we think.
Yeah, teachers are really important. People who work in youth groups. But I read on your website about your teacher. That's kind of like both teacher and a interest group thing as well. And what a great thing. Isn't that great?
Yeah, I know. Now he's retired, which is so sad because a lot of the students can't get the same experience with him. But I know there's so many other amazing teachers out there who are, trying to spread their passion as well.
Well, and you're paying it forward to yourself, right? So
Yeah, yes, I'm trying my best. Thank you.
there you go.
So how do you keep your skills, current with the rapidly changing space industry? I know you said you read the news every morning. Are there any other things you do to, just stay updated with the things that are happening?
Yeah, just even sort of scanning through the news and looking at the headlines on things in the space industry. And there are a number of websites, for example, that pull that sort of stuff together, where you can find it pretty easily. That's a good way. I keep in touch with various colleagues on social media, but also by email and on the phone. So you're finding out from them all the time about what's going on, and just sort of staying open to things. Sometimes you find things in the strangest ways. Like I said, I've gone back to flying again, and through that, I've bumped into a couple of people. I met a guy. I met a guy in my glider club whose father used to write all the space stuff for the New York Times, and we've had some great discussions about what his dad did and what he did when he was like helping out his dad during the Apollo program when he was a kid, and was down at the press site with his dad. I was also very jealous because he got to go watch all the Apollo launches. I didn't. My family was couldn't afford it to send me to Florida for things like that. So. But you never know where something will pop up. So you kind of keep an open mind about things, and read a lot, and keep talking to people.
Yeah, and when you're reading these news, like what makes you excited about the future of the space industry, but what also kind of makes you nervous or like, kind of holds you back?
Well, there are a couple of interesting trends. One, of course, is the one I think most people recognize these days is commercialization. You're seeing space. Everybody knows it's SpaceX, but you've got Blue Origin and the big companies as well that are already out there at Boeing and Northrop Grumman and stuff, and Lockheed Martin. But you've got all these startups out there doing things, and I think that's going to be really as the ability to expand into operations in space on a commercial level grows, it's going to have a huge impact on things. So there's that factor. But also you're seeing a lot of countries now, countries that you might not expect, like the UAE, right? The folks at the UAE just put a probe in orbit around Mars. Wow, how amazing is that? And I think we're going to see a lot of countries. India's got a human spaceflight program. They're kicking off. So I think we'll see more internationalization of spaceflight as well, which I think will have some really interesting impacts on things. I'm not quite sure what they'll all be, but I think that'll be interesting to see. On the history side of things, the tech revolution is really just sort of starting to sort of catch up, I think, with the history profession. And so we're seeing more and more source material going online, archives going online, and being able to leverage the capability to do historical research in new and more interesting, I think in some ways, more interesting ways. So we'll see a lot of changes there. So I think that there's lots of positive energy in both the history side of things, but also in the space side of things. And there are lots of aspects of that could be worrisome as well. Like space debris and more players out there, there's more things that can possibly go wrong. But I think most of humanity understands how important it is to do this, and I think there's lots of positive trends in terms of international cooperation going on. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely very excited about commercialization. I think, the fact that more people will be able to go to space, or will be able to discover more things or put up more satellites to help understand Earth better, but also do space exploration, definitely excites me. I think, the public is starting to understand the value of space and the value of space exploration. And so getting that out to everyone is just really exciting. So
yeah, I mean, spending on space, a lot of people will say, even and this is true even back in the 60s when I was growing, in the middle of the space race in the 60s, people would complain about, why are we spending all this money in space? Well, we're not actually spending the money in space, we're spending it down here on Earth, right? Building things and paying people's wages to work on things. But the benefits are huge. And I'm not even talking about the spin-off benefits, but just the inspirational benefits and what we learn about the universe and ourselves in the process of all these things. I mean, it's stuff that we learn from this kind of research is life-changing for how we look at the world and how we see things. And it's a small investment. I mean, NASA's budget is about 1/2% of the federal budget. That's a really small amount of money when you think about the payoff we get from it.
yeah, I know. I think I saw something where they were comparing the US military budget to NASA's budget. It's very different. It's like huge, like way off. And so people are always complaining how there's so much big budget that's going into the space industry and space exploration. But if you look at the value off of the space exploration and the annual budget that you give to space organizations compared to the other things that we're spending money on, I think there's a great value in spending in space industries. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's an investment in our future,
Yeah.
your future as well as mine. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. And the goal of this interview series is really to show children, like I've mentioned before, around the world that you don't have to look like someone or be a genius in like math or science in order to be part of the space industry, because there's so many unique career options in the space industry. So what is your take on that, even though it's, clear what you were saying before in the interview?
yeah, I'm living proof that you don't have to be a math genius to work at NASA, right? So I am completely in agreement with your view on this, that if you bring passion to what you do, and you do the best you can in every job, even the lousy jobs. I mean, when I was a young pilot in the Air Force, you get these additional, in addition to flying airplanes, you have these other jobs to do, right? They're called additional duties. And I got one of these additional duties that was really kind of not very important. But it's one that needed to be done, right? And I remember kind of grumbling about it to my boss, and my boss says, "Shut up and do a good job at it, and maybe you'll learn something." And it turns out, as usual, he was right. And so I did. It was not a really important job, but I did the best job I could. And his boss noticed. He said, "Hey, that Barry guy did a really good job on this thing. Most people don't even bother with it." And that was kind of one of the first steps. People start noticing, well, this person's trustworthy in small things, and so we're going to trust them with other things, and that opens doors of opportunity all over the place. So.
Yeah, I think that's really important to always remember. I think the idea of passion is greater than everything else is, something that you're mentioning throughout the interview, which we should key in on. And to kind of wrap up the interview, my last question for you is, what advice do you have for young people regarding their pursuit of a passion in the space industry and the STEM fields in general? Something that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Oh boy, there's a lot of things I wish I knew when I was younger. And of course, next year, there's a lot of things I wish I knew last year. You're always learning, right?
Yeah,
that's an important aspect, I think, too, is to remember that life's all about learning. But I think in terms of advice that I wish I'd known, I wish I'd had more confidence that, in fact, I would be able to do, that I would get to a point in the future where I could do these things. Because when you're young, you look at, and there's always obstacles in the way, and you think, oh, there's no way I'm going to get over all these obstacles. Well, you're not going to get there unless you try. Right? And I think the second thing I'd say is, don't lose sight of your passion. Yeah, I sort of did. I get to the academy, and yeah, I was going to get to go fly, which was great fun. But I'd really sort of been interested in going to space and working for NASA. And I realized when I changed majors, that it's like, well, that's a dream that's kind of gone, and that sort of faded away for a number of years. And then when I got to grad school the second time, and suddenly the door opened up again. It's like you could do your dissertation on space. And it's like, wow, this is really cool. Right? So I recommend that keep that fire stoked on your passion, and you may never get to use it, right? But you'll be that much happier on the way because you'll have been engaged in something you like doing. Right? You'll always have an interest on the side that's maybe not your paying job, but it may be something you just enjoy doing, right? And you never know when the door will open up, and that passion, might actually get a chance to, break loose and go do some interesting thing for you, and for everybody else. So I'd say stick with the passion, keep the fire stoked, and believe in yourself that you can do great things, because you can.
I think those are some amazing words to end the interview off. I mean, I'm a basketball player. I've been playing basketball since third grade. And so there's a specific quote that I would always say to myself is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so before I was kind of scared to miss a shot, but then once I realized that if I don't even try to make a shot, then obviously I'm going to miss everything because I'm not even trying. So I think that's perfectly related to what you were saying about just keep doing it, even if you think that you're very far off from it. Just keep, you keep your passion alive and just chase after your dreams is really important. And I think it's always important for all of us to continuously remember, regardless of whatever age we are. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Berry, for taking some time out of your day to share your story with us and give us such important advice.
Okay, Tika, it's been my pleasure, and good luck with your continuing interview process here. This is really an interesting project you got, and you're doing great at it. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.